and welcome to this review of my Epomaker DynaTab 75X keyboard. This was a donation from Epomaker. Thanks guys. I was quite excited to review this because, as I'm sure you can already tell, this is one of those keyboards with something nice and extra on it. I mean, it's not every day you get to cover something with a big ass display in it, after all. So, as the name implies, it's a 75% keyboard, which is one of those kind of weird in-between layouts. There are many variations of it, ranging from very squished to more loose, and this is probably the loosest version of it, with the nav 2 buttons wide instead of 1. It's basically 1 column shorter than a TKL, which means it doesn't save that much space over a TKL at the loss of the home and end buttons in this case, and a more squished area here. Personally, I'd rather just have a 10 keyless, but whatever, that's just a matter of taste anyway. I'll get to the good stuff later, but let's get the boring details out of the way first. It's a hot swappable chassis that you can order with 4 flavors of Epomaker branded MX clones, and as far as I can tell, these switches don't have any unique features. I don't think you can get a bare bones version of the keyboard either, so you have to pick one of them, it seems. These are the linear Wisteria switches. They're lighter and shorter travel than MX Red at 3.6mm and only about 45 grams of bottom out force respectively, so keep in mind that these are fairly sensitive even at a 2.2mm actuation point. There's really not that much to say about them other than that they look like blueberry and pistachio flavored ice cream. The board has no cable gutter, as you can see, and the cable comes out the rear right, which is a bit uncommon, but it does have 2 sets of flip-out feet, which are both rubber shod for extra grip, which is a nice touch. The cable it comes with is also really nice. It's very thick and it looks really retro with the smooth texture and big-ass connector. I really like this cable. I might use this as a standard in the future. The chassis is entirely made out of plastic, including the mounting plate, which is polycarbonate. Normally I would do a flex test at this point to see if it holds up, but there is a 10,000 mAh lithium battery inside, which in layman's terms is some spicy pepper, so I shall not be fucking around with it lest I create a huge keyboard fire in my room again. Also, it makes disassembly of the keyboard, of which there is no obvious way, even more hazardous. Weighing in at 2.34 pounds with an overall length of 13.58 inches, that's 1.06 kilos and 34.5 centimeters if you've managed to leave the Stone Age behind you, it's pretty light and not all that wide, although obviously the display at the top makes it take up much more vertical space than most keyboards. They brought the F key row a little bit closer to the alpha block to not make it ridiculous. If you use the F keys a lot, like me when I played Diablo 2, it's not ideal, but I get why they did it like this. It's fine. It's apparently filled with all kinds of foam and gaskets and other bullcrap too, though the sound is thankfully not as quiet as that would make you think. It's not the most bomb-proof keyboard I've ever held, but it doesn't look as if it's badly made. I mean, it looks fairly well executed, just not made out of adamantium or whatever. The keycaps are definitely the keyboard's weakest point in my opinion. You can get them in this 50 Shades of Grey version, or a purple equivalent, and in their defense, they are thick double shots. But they have front-facing translucent legends to support the south-facing LED placement for the RGB. Now, why you would want south-facing LEDs, I do not know, even though I've seen it touted as a feature on multiple occasions. But what I do know is that A, RGB legends are really hard to read on grey keycaps, and B, south-facing legends might make the keytops prettier, but they don't read anywhere near as nicely as top-printed legends in my opinion, as you can probably tell from this footage. The RGB itself is pretty okay, it looks nice and smooth and fairly well bundled, but I just can't read a goddamn thing on it, and even with the lights off, I think you can barely see anything on the camera either. Now, ostentatiousness can be tolerable if it's done well, and on a few occasions it can even be really nice, but as soon as it starts to actually detract from functionality, I tend to get annoyed fairly rapidly. Don't hit me with that Apple-ass form over function nonsense. And like many other keycaps with translucent legends, it's even harder to read with the RGB off, and the front-facing legends make that even worse as well. I wonder if you guys can read what's on the keycaps at all, to be honest. To make matters worse, there must be something badly wrong with their quality control, because look closely at the layout, I mean, even with the camera pretty much horizontal like this, I doubt you can see a lot, but anyway, there's a bunch of keys in the wrong position. I purposely left them where I found them so that you can see what went wrong. F3 and F4 are swapped. Same goes for F7 and F8, delete and page down, and print screen and scroll lock. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before. That's really bad, and doesn't make this strange layout easier to get used to either. Now, this keyboard works completely fine, but like I said, this sort of thing does make me wonder how good their QC is. Now let's get to the fun part. This screen, which is really a 60 by 9 dot matrix display made up of individual RGB LEDs, which is probably why it's got such a hot brick for a battery. It's full RGB too, so it can do the 16 million colors thing, which is nice, and you can program it too, which we'll come to in a bit. By default, it's got the following modes: time and calendar, which is this one. I haven't set it manually, so I think it reads it from your computer. CPU, temperature and usage, though that one it can't read on my rig apparently. Battery power, a custom mode, again we'll get to that in a bit. Wave RGB, snake mode, RGB ripple, and my personal favorite, rain. Then sideways comets and a typing mode, which reads out what you type on it, except it doesn't read space bars or punctuation marks. Pretty cool stuff, it must be said. This makes up for a lot of the shortcomings. Now, the way you program the display is through their utility software, doubtlessly another Electron widget, which you also use for the macros. That works very similar to many other programs. It's simple and it works pretty well. And you can also do the backlight from here. Now, under screen, you can program the screen, but it's quite a palaver, as it's done frame by frame. You need to make a new frame for, well, every frame, and pixel by pixel. And you can't draw shapes or use a bucket tool or anything like that. You can't even move what's on the screen one column to the left or right. So if you want to program scrolling text, you have to redraw everything again from the start. So I just programmed my name into it in rainbow colors, and I also did it in white. And this immediately reveals a problem with this keyboard. Because this is not this. These colors are completely off, and the camera makes the colors look a little bit flatter than what they look like in reality, but in reality they do look all like shades of yellow and pink. And the white lettering also looks pinkish yellow. Let me show that to you. The way you do it is you go to My Work, then you do Edit, and you upload it. Go back to the drawboard. So that's easy enough. Anyway, this looks ridiculous. Now, what this means is that the light bundling is very poor. In other words, the colors look curdled. But I find that very strange, because if you take any of the RGB modes, the lighting looks pretty good. Sure, it does look curdled, but it's clearly capable of showing all the colors. So why it doesn't do that for my own pictures, I'm not 100% sure, though I have an idea. Before you ask, yes, you can also upload your own pictures, and it'll stick that on as best as it can. So obviously, here's the Doom title screen in glorious 12 by 9 resolution. Though you can resize pictures, it doesn't stretch, so you need something long and thin. And a magnifying glass to be able to see the positioning window in the software, which for some reason they made absolutely microscopic. And looking through my pictures, I realized that there was nothing that was going to look good. So I programmed in Green the Smiley instead, who looks very, very pink. In other words, it's best to stick to simple drawings and bold primary or secondary colors, so RGB and CMY, and you should be fine. But it's probably best altogether to stick with the pre-programmed modes, which are awesome. You can't customize them, unfortunately. I had hoped to use the rain effect to make it green so I could have a matrix keyboard, but that's not possible, unfortunately. Still, it's cool and a really nice eye catcher. It adds a good deal of personality. So, in short, the keyboard itself is kind of meh, but the screen is pretty cool. There are some things that could be better, and a few things they can add to the software to get a lot more out of the screen. So it's certainly not without its flaws, but it is a fun keyboard for if you're not too much of a snob and can deal with the weird keycaps. You can get it at ANSI and ISO UK for $140, which is not cheap, but not really expensive either, considering what you get for it. There are keyboards with higher fidelity displays and lighting modes, but most of them are much more expensive. I don't mind it, it's a fun board to have, though I'd probably slot some other switches in myself and customize the keycaps if I was going to use this for a longer period of time. Before I forget, there's also a much more conservative version that replaces the screen for a slot that you can stick a phone or a tablet or something into. Personally, I just use it as a big pencil tray, but whatever. The idea for this, I guess, is to use it for mobile gaming, which seems like a weird concept if I'm honest, but whatever. They also halve the battery capacity for this, understandably. This version comes in at $90. That's it for this review. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And following is a typing demonstration of me typing on this keyboard.